that I love this story. I've never forgotten it. A woman standing in white, ready to be baptized. She gave her testimony, and her testimony was that she lived all her life as a Jehovah's Witness, and she could never, ever be sure that she was saved. It was driving her crazy. There was no assurance of salvation, and she came to the point of deciding, I cannot go on like this. I'm simply going to take my life. Somehow God put it in her heart that before she took her life, she would kneel down and open her Bible and read one more time the Gospel of Luke right through, and then she would take her life. And she said that as she got to the end of the book and she saw Jesus in the garden, agonizing with sweating drops of blood to be obedient for sinners and pay their complete price, God saved her soul and removed all doubt and gave her the gift that Jesus is real and he has covered her sin. And she was standing there ready to be baptized 2 days later.
When the mind is deprived of oxygen in an existential crisis, the subject is likely to experience whatever they've been conditioned to expect, whether it's astral projection or spectral manifestations or a long dark tunnel or whatever. The longtime atheists who have either never had those expectations or have gotten over it tend not to have such experiences at all, while Hindus have profoundly different near-death experiences, coming back to consciousness with claims of having met their gods and having proof of reincarnation, which of course contradicts the Christian accounts. And again, no one can show that their experience is any more valid or that they've really even experienced anything outside of their own culturally conditioned imaginations. 50 years of research into near-death experiences, and you've got a handful at best of things that don't have a clear explanation, and everything else doesn't even show that there's a there. However, neither evolution nor Christianity can explain the rapid expansion of the early church. That is better explained by human corruption, because it started with a Jewish cult of renunciate leftist pacifist abstentionists and was incrementally altered to become a new and different religion of right-wing militant dominionists in pursuit of prosperity gospel. There's very little Christ left in Christianity anymore, a religion that I think Jesus would hardly recognize if he were alive today.
Back in the days, before the internet, you could hear stories like this, and they were proof positive that God and Jesus was real. Because this didn't happen in other religions. This only happened in Christianity. With the internet, we're getting the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. This next story, this man has a very parallel experience with the false goddess that this woman had with Christianity. And the main question is, God, how do I know that any of these gods are real? That either none of these gods are real, and this is psychology at work in a way that the science has not yet to describe, or all the gods are real, and you have your own God. I mean, where is the God of the Bible who is a jealous God and will not share his glory with other gods? I mean, and that being said, it's this goddess in the story you're about to hear. If all the other gods are false demonic gods, why in the hell did this false god jump in just in time to save this pagan man from committing suicide so that his life was spared? When Jesus says in the book of John, the thief cometh not but for the steal and to kill and destroy. And Satan is the great thief, or the prince of all the thieves trying to take the sheep of God out of the sheepfold. Why in the hell did this demon goddess not give this man reassurance and let this man kill himself, so that the devil, who is really behind this false god, would have his soul once he died. I mean, God, what I'm seeing is really disappointing me, disgusting me with you, God, making me doubt you. Jesus Christ, are you real? I mean, how do we know that none of the gods are real? And that in both cases, in the Christian case you heard, and in the case of the pagan man you're about to hear, that this some biological, deep, inner, universal biological drive to survive, to live, and to not die, is kicking in both these cases, and using the religion of the believer to persuade both people from killing themselves. Because what if deep down we know when you die, that's it, lights out, game over. And so we got a dichotomy in the psychiatry, in the soul, whatever hell you call it, a man. We want to believe that we're going to live forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And our mind produces illusions. How do we know that our mind is not producing illusions? Whatever religion you believe in, using whatever we believe to construct illusions that we're going to live forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And yet when it comes time to die, our mind offers every excuse. Oh, you got family back. If you go into the light, what about your sons, your children who will miss you, who need you back on earth to live for them, to provide for them? Maybe you've not done enough to finish the job for this God, so you need to go back. You don't want to die. Because subconsciously you know that when you die, that's it, lights out, game over, darkness. I mean, where is the God in Jesus, sanctifying his name, apart from all the other false gods and psychiatry and psychology of mankind? Where is God in Jesus? Why is this God in Jesus not separating himself from what we can do, from what we are, from what our psychiatry is? And God, for this, I want to curse you.
Now, let's take a big cross in traditions here. This picture is of Ramakrishna Paramhamsa, and he is a famous mystic from India. And the story is that when he was worshipping Mother Kali, that is to say Kali Ma, or the goddess Kali, he began to ask himself why, if he was worshipping a living goddess, why would she not respond to his worship? And this question nagged him day and night. Then he began to pray to Kali, "Mother, you've been gracious to many devotees in the past, and you have revealed yourself to them. Why would you not reveal yourself to me also? Am I not also your son?" He would weep bitterly and sometimes even cry out loudly while worshiping. One day he was impatient to see Mother Kali. He was so impatient to see Mother Kali that he decided to end his life, despair to the point of suicide. He seized a sword hanging on the wall of the temple, because the sword is a ritual object belonging to the goddess Kali, and was about to strike himself with it when suddenly he saw light issuing from the deity, or also called the murti, the idol in the temple, and this light came over him in waves. He was overwhelmed by those waves, and from then after he was in regular, if not constant, contact with the goddess Kali, the goddess of his choice. And he's also one of the most famous spiritual teachers that India has ever produced. Ramakrishna Paramhamsa. Paramhamsa means
Jesus and his disciples were talking. And I think it was John came to Jesus and said, "We saw another person casting out demons in your name, and we forbade him because he does not follow with us." And Jesus said, "Forbid him not, for he that is not against us is on our part." That being said, we are Christians. Remember, they're not against Jesus, so they're for Jesus. And yet they have conflicting near-death experiences. One type of Christian sees a Jesus who is loving. And another type of Christian sees a Jesus who is a flame of anger. So both types of Christians are on Jesus' side, and yet they present a Jesus that contradicts himself. So what in the fuck is going on here? Look at these next illustrations. I'm presenting to you Howard Storm. Had a near-death experience in Paris, France in 1986, I think. Or maybe it was 1985, June the 1st. And then we got Howard Pittman, who has a near-death experience, and we find a God of everlasting wrath. Whereas Howard Storm says God is not in the punishment business. God is not an angry God. Dr. Howard Pittman presents a God who speaks about everlasting wrath. A God who is angry. Yeah, in Howard Storm's experience, Jesus is not angry at the sinner. He's really hurt by the sinner. But in Howard Pittman's, God is angry at the sinner. She says she saw her mom burning in hell. She hates to have to go tell the story of seeing her mom in hell. And she said one day Jesus said to her, if she stops preaching his word, he will destroy her.
And even my biological parents, I saw them in hell. My mother, my father, and even my grandmother that just died this January. I don't like to talk about that. It's very painful. It's only the grace of God. I don't like to talk about hell. Sometimes, if they call me to go and preach, go and tell the testimony of this, I'll say, no, I'm not going, because I know I reach this side. And one day Jesus said, if you stop preaching my word or tell my people my word, I will destroy you. So I always pray to Jesus whenever I stand.
Do you hear that testimony? Do you hear that? What right did we have to say that your testimony is true, Howard Storm, and her testimony is false? Both of your near-death experiences appeal to scriptures. So what I'm trying to say, if all these near-death experiences and all these revelations from God are real, if Jesus is real, why do they contradict one another? Why do they not all point to one objective truth?
Jesus clearly identified those that followed him, and he placed them into two groups.
This is frightening.
He said there were a group we call the sayers, and another group that was called the doers. He said not all of the sayers would be in heaven.
Scary.
But all the doers would be. The choice, therefore, is yours. Choose you this day.
Well, let's fast forward to
whether or not you will be a sayer or a doer.
Let you hear a little bit
As a teenager
of his
growing
testimony.
up in that
there
little
was fast
country
forward.
village, I tried to live a life that was both pleasing to my Father and this God. It seems the body itself is not capable of regeneration. In other words, what I had medically, they considered almost always to be fatal. They called an ambulance and rushed me from the clinic to the local hospital. The local hospital was very small. The equipment was somewhat antiquated, but the doctors began a desperate attempt to preserve my life by infusing me with blood and drip, and at the same time trying to evacuate the right cavity in an attempt to find the internal blowout itself. They were overwhelmed by the internal loss of blood. A little after 6 a.m. that morning, Dr. Ross started major surgery along with his assistants. And just before 6 p.m. that afternoon, they had completed it. Dr. Ross had met me on that Friday afternoon, and he never went to his house until after 6 o'clock Saturday evening. Wherever I go to give this testimony, I always try to include this part as a testimonial to the dedication of those medical people. Those wonderful and marvelous medical people was working so diligently on this body. However, I was not even there, and they didn't know it. Back there in that ambulance, every breath that came to me came only as a result of all the strength of my willpower. I fought as hard as I could to breathe in, and then just as hard to breathe out. By now the pain was so great, I knew that I could not long endure. No human could. I was crying to God for relief from that pain when the lights went out. Suddenly, I was overwhelmed with darkness as I was just swallowed with this veil.
Listen to this part.
The vastness of that darkness is what overwhelmed me.
This part is what helped me.
I don't know where that place is I went. The Bible calls it the valley of the shadow of death. Christians refer to it as crossing Jordan. I can't describe it because I don't have any words. If I had any words, you couldn't comprehend it. But don't you worry about it, because you'll know what it's like. You're going to cross that veil too. In that vast darkness, I was overwhelmed just by the vastness of the darkness itself. I felt alone and forsaken. I'd never felt so alone. I'd never witnessed, I'd never experienced absolute total darkness before. I had met my appointed time to die. As a Christian, I had no quarrel with that knowledge. I believed with all my heart that God had a right to set an appointment to take my life. I believed that he was the only one that had that right. For I'd read in this book in Revelation that he had made me for his pleasure. That gave him the right. All with that knowledge at all. I didn't leave home in my own. I turned my face to the wall and I asked God to extend my life. After all, I'd been his servant for 30 years. Is God a liar? Choice is yours. I tend to believe God does what he says myself. I take him seriously. Some people don't, but with this in mind, I'm going to quote verbatim part of what God said. When the thunderous voice of the living God came down over those gates before his words reached me, the tone of his wrath knocked me on my face and zapped every ounce of strength in my being, and then my God proceeded to tell me who I was, not who I thought I was. Those two people were not even kin. Quote, your faith is dead. Your works are in vain. The life that you lived and offered to me as a life of Christian service, I rejected that as an abomination in the Pharisee. What made you think I would take that from a Laodicean type Christian?
Wait a minute. God the Father is telling this. But it says in John, for the Father judges no man, but hath committed all judgment under the Son. Yet this man here is being judged by God the Father.
In fact, untold millions are living the same life that
Jesus,
you live,
are you really
and they
real?
stand in danger of my everlasting wrath. Unquote, the living God. My works, he said, were good works. They are my works. I ordain them for my church, and my people offer me those works every day. Standing on the street corner testifying, that is by my commission. Going up to the jails preaching, that is by my commission.
Man, I'm so
going to the
ugly.
hospital and praying, that is by my commission. Opening your home and sharing with others, that is by my commission. That is my works. They're good works. They're ordained for me by me, and my people offer them to me every day. But in your case, they are in vain. They're in vain because you didn't do them for me. You did them for a false God. And I said in my word, Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, I am a jealous God, and I will have no other gods before me. Suddenly the scales fell from my eyes. I saw what it was they wanted me to see. I was pleading for the wrong life. I was pleading for a life that came
Sounds like
from dirt,
me.
and it was going back
Pleading
to dirt.
to be a good-looking
The least of
guy.
my possessions. But housed within was an immortal life, a life that would never end. And that's the life that was precious to
Neglecting
him.
my spiritual side.
Suddenly, as those scales fell off, I saw him. In my mind, for
I
who
love
he
this
is,
part.
my real father, my very best friend.
I love
The
this part.
creator of all of this, he hurt for me.
He hurt
The
for me.
least and most insignificant of his entire kingdom, and he hurt for me. Now, nothing else mattered but my Father and his will. Had he picked me up then and dropped me into the pits of hell, I could have said no more than amen, amen. I justly deserve. But instead, when this life was no longer important to me, he gave it back.
I love this video. I'm on his side. But truth is truth, and no lies is the truth. Jesus, are you real, or what about that God helmet? And a person on LSD had a near-death experience where he met the light and felt he was one with everybody. Jesus, are you real? Are you really real? Either Jesus is true, or he is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated upon mankind. I will say that. Don't call him a good teacher. He's either God, he's either the Son of God, or he is the worst imposter ever. One of the two. Take your choice. Please listen to the following 2 short stories about Jesus Christ and tell me, is Jesus loving, or is Jesus fire and brimstone, wrath, hating sinners? Or is Jesus bipolar? Both. Has Jesus got split personality disorder?
And he said to me, give me what you can't handle, and I will handle it. I'll take care of it. Give me everything.
I was conducting a revival, a associational-wide revival sponsored by the 27 Baptist churches in that parish in Louisiana. You know, in Louisiana, they do not have counties like we have in North Carolina. They have parishes. And this was a parish-wide revival. And we had come to the last night of the meeting, and I was preaching this sermon, and the meeting was being held in the rodeo arena. And as I preached, on the last tier of seats, over to my right, on the last row, top seats, were 3 men that I'd never seen before. And they had laughed and made fun. Now, preacher, it has never bothered me when a little baby starts crying, the mother gets up and walks out. That don't bother me. But under God, I cannot preach if I see 2 young people laughing. I cannot preach if I see anybody mocking. It just somehow or another takes it away from me. 3 times. I stopped. And I said the last time, if you men don't want to hear me preach, a lot of these people have come from miles to be here tonight, and they do, would you just get up and walk out of the arena? One of them said, if you think you're man enough to come up here and put us out, you just come up here. And I prayed a prayer. Never have prayed before, never have prayed since. I said, dear Jesus, let me backslide for 15 minutes. And I promise you, Lord, if you'll let me backslide for 15 minutes, I'll go up there and beat the devil out of all 3 of them. And God said, I didn't call you to fight, I called you to preach. He said, you turn them over to me. And I did. And they continued to mock all the way through the sermon. We had over 400 people to walk down that aisle that night and give their hearts to Jesus Christ. I fully intended to never show them enough attention to address them again. But just as I was ready to pronounce the benediction, my arm came up. Preacher, did anything ever come out that you hadn't planned to say? That you couldn't help but say it? Has that ever happened to you, brother? How many of you preachers here have ever had something just come out that you didn't have in your notes and it just came out? Yes, every preacher, every God-called preacher has. And my arm just came out and I said, I do not know who you 3 gentlemen are. But all 3 of you stepped over God's deadline, God signed your death warrant, and God's going to kill all 3 of you. That was about 10:15 Sunday night. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I didn't know who these men were. They were 3 businessmen. One of them put the key in the door of his office on Main Street, Ringo, Louisiana, and dropped dead. At 11:30, the second man started across the street to a little restaurant to have his lunch from his office. And a lady was driving up the street and almost ran over him. She said he just walking along normal, fell flat on his face, and died right there in the street. At 5:30 that afternoon, the third man was sitting in his office, and he said to his secretary, "My two friends are in hell, and before the sun goes down, I'll join them." And pitched out at their feet a corpse.
Who is the real Jesus? I mean, Howard Storm, you believe in the love of Jesus. This man, J. Harold Smith, believed in a fire and brimstone Jesus. Howard Storm, is your Jesus the real Jesus? Or are you selling us a bill of goods? A loving Jesus we all want to believe in, but the real Jesus is about. Maybe God's got a split personality disorder. One that's loving and one that's fire and brimstone wrath.